Two people, same job, same salary, same 100 months set aside for their future. But one of them will retire with nearly 3 times more money than the other. And the only difference between them is 10 years. Not 10 years of extra work. Not 10 years of extra deposits. Just 10 years of starting sooner. That gap is not a typo. That gap is not a trick of math. That gap is one of the most powerful and terrifying forces in personal finance. And once you see it clearly, you will never look at money the same way again. Most Americans are not investing early. In fact, a survey by Bankrate found that more than half of adult Americans have less than 3 months of expenses saved, let alone money sitting in a market growing for their retirement. We are a nation that is extraordinarily good at putting things off. We tell ourselves we will start investing when we get that raise, when the kids are out of diapers, when the car is paid off, when life settles down. But here is the brutal truth that nobody tells you at the kitchen table or in high school or even in most college classrooms. Life never fully settles down, and every single month you wait is not just a month delayed. It is a month of compounding growth you will never, ever get back. The financial industry has a word for this. They call it the cost of waiting. But that phrase does not do it justice. Because what we are really talking about is not a cost you can see on a bill. It is a cost you only discover decades later when you're staring at your retirement account and wondering why it looks so much smaller than you expected. It is a silent, invisible tax on procrastination, and it is one of the most expensive mistakes ordinary Americans make. Here is the question that should keep you up at night. If you invest just 100 months starting at age 25, and your money earns an average annual return of 7%, which is historically a reasonable expectation for a diversified index fund, how much will you have by age 65? Take a guess before you read on. Most people guess somewhere around 100,000 or maybe 150,000. They're not even close. The real number is approximately 262,000. From just 100 a month. Now here is where it gets shocking. If you wait until age 35 to start, and you invest the same 100 every month with the same 7% annual return, how much will you have by age 65? The answer is roughly 121,000. Less than half. You contributed for 30 years instead of 40. You put in 12,000 less in total deposits. But the difference in your final balance is not 12,000. It is more than 140,000. That is the cost of waiting 10 years. That is what starting late actually looks like when the math is done. By the end of this story, you're going to understand exactly why that gap exists, how it affects real people making real decisions, and most importantly, what you can do starting right now to make sure you're on the right side of that equation. This is not about being rich. This is not about making 6 figures or having a financial advisor on speed dial. This is about understanding one simple concept that can change the entire trajectory of your financial life, no matter where you're starting from. Meet Marcus and his younger sister Diane. They grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a house where money was always tight. Their father worked at a distribution warehouse and their mother picked up shifts at a local grocery store. Nobody in that house talked about investing. Nobody talked about index funds or compound interest. The word portfolio was not part of the family vocabulary. What they did talk about was surviving, getting through the month, and hoping the car did not break down before the next paycheck. Marcus graduated from a state college at 22, landed a job in logistics, and spent his early 20s doing what most young Americans do. He paid his student loans, covered his rent, bought himself a decent truck, and tried to figure out life. By the time he was 25, he had cleared most of his debt and had a little breathing room in his budget. A coworker named Terry, a quiet guy in his 50s who always seemed calm in a way Marcus could not explain, sat down with him one afternoon in the break room and said something Marcus never forgot. Terry said, "Marcus, I don't care what you do with your money. Buy lottery tickets if you want. But if you can find 100 a month and put in a simple index fund starting right now, I promise you it will be the single best financial decision of your life. Marcus laughed it off at first. $100 felt both too small to matter and too large to spare. But Terry was persistent. He showed Marcus the numbers on a napkin in that break room. He showed him what 100 a month at 7% looked like over 40 years. Marcus stared at that napkin for a long time. Then he went home, opened a Roth IRA online, and set up an automatic transfer for 100 on the first of every month. He did not tell anyone. He did not feel like a financial genius. He just said it and tried not to think about it. Diane watched her brother do this from a distance. She was 4 years younger and in a different season of life. At 25, she was in the middle of grad school, living on ramen and teaching assistant stipends, trying to finish her master's degree in education. She told herself she would start investing once she was done with school. Then she finished school at 27 and told herself she would start once she paid off her grad school loans. Then at 29, she met someone, got married, and the two of them bought a small house in the suburbs. The down payment wiped out their savings. At 31, she had her first child. At 33, she had her second. Every year, there was a perfectly good reason to wait. She was not careless. She was not irresponsible. She was a middle school teacher, a devoted mother, a careful budgeter. She was just doing what millions of Americans do. She was living her life and telling herself that investing was something she would get to eventually. Finally, at age 35, her husband sat her down and said, "Diane, we have to start. Right now, not next year." And so she did. She opened the same kind of account Marcus had, transferred the same 100 a month, and felt proud of herself for finally getting started. For 30 years, both Marcus and Diane were faithful. Neither one missed a single month. They both dealt with job changes and market crashes and moments when the account dropped and their stomachs dropped with it. In 2008, Marcus watched his balance fall by nearly 40% in what felt like a matter of weeks. He called Terry, who was retired by then, and Terry told him not to sell. "The market always comes back," Terry said, "and when it does, you want to already be in it." Marcus stayed in. So did Diane when her turn came in the next downturn. They were both disciplined. They both trusted the process. But the process treated them differently. When Marcus turned 65, he sat down on his laptop and opened his account. The balance read $262,481. He had deposited $48,000 of his own money over 40 years. The rest, more than $214,000, was growth. It was the result of 40 years of returns stacking on returns, of money growing on money that had already grown, in a cycle that never stopped and never slept and never asked him to do anything except stay patient. When Diane turned 65 and did the same thing, her balance read $121,997. She had deposited $36,000 of her own money over 30 years. She had been just as consistent, just as disciplined, but she had contributed for a decade less. And the compounding cycle had a decade less to work its quiet magic. She called Marcus to tell him about her balance. He told her his. There was a long silence on the phone. 10 years, she finally said. 10 years, he agreed. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Diane said, "I keep thinking about all the good reasons I had for waiting." Marcus said gently, "I know. I had them too. I just got lucky that Terry showed me that napkin." What Marcus and Diane experienced is the direct result of compound interest, which Albert Einstein reportedly called the eighth wonder of the world. The core idea is simple. When your investment earns a return, that return gets added to your balance, and then your new, larger balance earns a return. And then that larger balance earns a return. And so on, year after year, decade after decade. The growth is not just additive. It is exponential. It accelerates over time rather than remaining constant. The reason starting at 25 versus 35 makes such a dramatic difference is that compounding needs time above all else. The first decade of Marcus's investing, from age 25 to 35, was not just 10 years of contributions. It was 10 years of early growth that then compounded on itself for an additional 30 years. That first decade did not just add to the pile. It multiplied everything that came after it. When Diane skipped that first decade, she was not just skipping 10 years of 100 monthly deposits. She was skipping 10 years of foundational growth that her later contributions never had the chance to build on. This is why financial advisors say that time in a market beats timing the market. You do not need to be a genius investor. You do not need to pick the right stocks or predict the next crash. You need to start early and stay consistent. 100 a month in a low-cost index fund is a vehicle almost any working American can access. A Roth IRA through a provider like Fidelity or Vanguard has no minimum deposit requirement. You can get started this week. You can set it to automatic and let time do the heavy lifting. The math does not care about your income bracket. It does not care about your zip code. It only cares about when you start. Marcus and Diane were not defined by their income. They were not defined by their education or their neighborhood or how much they knew about finance. They were defined by one decision, made 10 years apart, that echoed through the rest of their financial lives in ways neither of them fully understood until it was too late to change. The most powerful thing you can take from their story is this. The best time to start investing was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Not next month when your budget frees up. Not next year when things settle down. Today, with whatever you have, even if that number is 50 or 25 or even 10 to start. Because the compounding clock starts the moment you make your first deposit, and every month you wait is a month of growth you cannot buy back at any price. Marcus still thinks about Terry and that napkin in the break room. He has shown it, recreated from memory on dozens of other napkins, to his own children, his co-workers, and anyone who will listen. Because he knows that the gap between him and his sister was not about talent or luck or working harder. It was about a conversation he happened to have at 25 that showed him what was possible. Consider this your napkin. Consider this the conversation. The numbers are real. The math is not going anywhere. And neither is time, except in one direction. If this story opened your eyes to what starting early can actually do for your financial future, follow along for more stories just like this one. Every week we break down the real math behind money decisions that ordinary Americans face, told through stories that make the numbers hit home. Your future self is watching.